Good evening and welcome to the regular council meeting for February 5th, 2020, and we're beginning at 7 p.m. in council chambers. We're on to item 2, confirmation of agenda. Are there any emergent items from any of the councillors?
No, you're welcome.
Oh. Thank you, Councillor Peterson.
Yes, Your Worship. I would like to add a discussion or a brief discussion about my tree initiative, so wherever you would like to put that.
Jen, where do you see that one fitting best?
Your Worship, under 11.2.
Councillor Peterson, can you still hear me or hear us?
I can hear you perfectly.
Thank you. I will be presenting a motion, so just for a brief moment or two, I'll be turning the chair over to you, if that's okay?
That's great, fine, yep.
Okay, so officially the chair is turned over to Councillor Peterson, and at this time I'd like to add an item, and it's an emergent item. If I can add that, can I do the motion right now then, Jen?
Your Worship, you would add the motion.
Okay.
First to the.
Okay, so I'm adding.
The item first to the agenda.
Okay, so I'm adding an item concerning FOIP Section 24. And where do you see that coming in then, Jen? When would we deal with it?
Your Worship, you can add that item, or you should add that item under 13, urgent business.
Thank you. And Councillor Peterson, that's the only thing that I needed to do was to add that to our agenda.
Thank you, Worship. I relinquish the chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. I wasn't sure if you were actually going to release it back to me once you get a taste of that, once you get a taste of that power. So we will be moving in camera at the end of the meeting for this particular night, and I believe we have no presentations or recognitions. We did have a delegation, but they have canceled for tonight. And I don't believe we have anything in item 6 on the consent agenda, which brings us to item 7, confirmation of minutes. 7.1. We need a motion to confirm the agenda as amended. Thank you, Councillor Sobel. And you're making that motion, or is former?
I do. Yep. I move.
So Councillor Sobel has made the motion to adopt the agenda as amended. All in favor?
I vote in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. And now this brings us to item 7.1, adoption of the regular council meeting minutes for December 18th, 2019.
So move, Your Worship.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor to adopt those minutes. All in favor? And Councillor Peterson?
Aye.
Okay, so that's great. We have a motion to adopt those minutes. Item 7.2, adoption of the regular council meeting minutes for January 22nd, 2020. Councillor Sobel?
I move those minutes, Your Worship.
You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And Councillor Peterson?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 8, I believe we have no tabled items, which brings us to item 9, 9.1, items from administration, 9.1, 2020 FCSS grant recommendations. And we have Linda Bernicki here from the FCSS department. Welcome, Linda.
So the first slide in front of you is just an overview of the financials of the comparison that we received $74,600 in requests, and our budget is $64,000. Excuse me, for the FCSS grants, and so the total recommendation for the distribution of the grants is the $64,000, which was approved in the budget. The next item is just the comparison of the applicants. And so as you can see, only 2 organizations are receiving what they requested. One is Growing Families, and that's because of an MOU that was signed with the town in 2017 for their funding. And the other one is Meals on Wheels, because their request was only $500. And the rest of the applications on an average are receiving between $1,200 and $1,400 less than they requested due to the amount of the budget money we have and the distribution across the board. So one of the highlights that I wanted to show with the demographics is there's been an increase in the percentage of the child and youth programs and services with respect to the funding, and that is mainly due to the new and enhanced partnerships that we've developed in the community and encouraging those that provide programs and services to children and youth. If they qualify for our funding, we are encouraging them to apply for a funding they may not have applied before, or they understand that it's a priority of the FCSS grants, and so some of them have changed their service delivery to include this age range also. So we have a total of 10 applications that are being recommended for approval, and 5 of them are multi-year, so that means that they're receiving they do not have to reapply for 3 years if it's for the same initiative or program as per the policy that council passed with the FCSS grants. And then the other ones are the annual ones are programs or services that have never applied before. So they have to receive funding from the town for 3 years in a row before they can be eligible to see if they can be moved to multi-year funding. And that's my presentation, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your presentation, Linda. Councillors who are here, do you have any questions or comments? Former Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say thank you for the, I appreciate the demographic breakdown. So it's, I can kind of report to people where the money is going and what type of groups are getting it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Peterson, do you have any questions for Linda?
No, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you again, Linda, for your presentation, and thank you again, Councillor Peterson. I think we're good.
Ready with the motion?
Oh, sorry, thank you. Sorry, Linda. Councillor Sobel.
Your Worship, I would move that council approve the following FCSS grant applications for funding: Foothills Fetal Alcohol Society Prevention and Awareness Project, $3,850. Accredited Sports to the Community, Healthy Families, $4,850. Golden Hills School Division Family School Community Resource Counseling Program, $7,850. Strathmore Municipal Library Visiting Library, $4,800. Project Hope Therapy Program for Children, $2,850. Canadian Mental Health Association, Suicide Bereavement and Family Support Counseling Program, $8,350. Calgary Catholic Immigration Society Newcomer Youth Programming, $6,850. Junior Achievement of Southern Alberta Financial Literacy for Strathmore Youth, $2,000. And finally, Strathmore Wheels on Meals Volunteer Coordination and Advertising, $500.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. You have a motion on the floor. All in favor? And Councillor Peterson?
Yes?
Thank you. And that brings us to item 9.2. Thank you again, Linda, very much. That brings us to item 9.2, Proclamation Kin Canada Day, and it's coming from legislature.
Worship, the Kin Canada has sent a request to council to proclaim Kin Canada Day in Strathmore, which is on February 20th, 2020, and also to declare the week of February 16th to 22nd as Kin Canada Week in Strathmore. I believe that the proclamation also coincides with a celebration and a flag raising that the club is planning on doing, in which I believe they will be inviting council to participate in. Administration is recommending the proclamation.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Worship. I would like to move that council proclaim Saturday, February 20th, 2020, Kin Canada Day, and declare the week of February 16th to 22nd, 2020, Kin Canada Week.
Thank you very much for that motion. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And Councillor Peterson?
Yes?
Thank you. Which brings us to item 10, committee reports, 10.1 committee meeting minutes. Any minutes from councillors that we need to go through?
I have none, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Sobel.
I would move, Your Worship, the council accept the council committee minutes as information.
Thank you very much for that motion. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And Councillor Peterson?
Yes?
Thank you. That brings us to 10.2, council reports from committees on which they sit. Any reports? Councillor Sobel.
Yes, Your Worship, I do have one, and that's in regards to the Chamber of Commerce, who met earlier this afternoon, actually. The board voted in favor of joining with the Strathmore Theatre Actors Guild to create a set of skits demonstrating the need for greater customer service and the negative aspects of failing to do so. The project is now in the hands of the Chamber Events Committee, with plans for productions in June and September. March 30th, 2020 has been named as this year's AGM date for the Chamber, and more details in that regard will follow. And finally, if I could read my writing. The board was very pleased with the recent Best Excellence Awards, which took place on January 31st, and I'm happy to thank council for the council members who attended and all the support that from the town that the chamber received for this event. And that's all I have for that report, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Any other reports? Councillor Peterson, I know it would be difficult to do it on the phone.
I don't have any reports, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sobel?
Move acceptance of the sole report then, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. We have a motion to accept the report as presented. All in favor? Councillor Peterson?
Yes?
Thank you. And that brings us to item 11, items directly related to council. 11.1, conversion therapy, and that is coming from Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship. And if it is acceptable, I will start by reading the motion that I have in place, and then I would appreciate the opportunity to comment on it. I would move that council advocate to the federal and provincial governments, including having the mayor send a formal request on behalf of council to end the practice of conversion therapy procedures, and further that council direct administration to draft a bylaw to prohibit the business practice of conversion therapy, including a fine for those advertising or offering conversion therapy services within Strathmore for council's consideration no later than June of 2020. And thank you for the opportunity to comment on this, Your Worship. Conversion therapy is a practice that aims to change an individual's sexual orientation to heterosexual or gender identity to cisgender, which means identifying with the sex assigned to them at birth. It employs various approaches from talk therapy and medication to aversion therapy that attempts to condition a person's behavior by causing them discomfort through things like electric shocks when they're exposed to specific stimuli. A 2019 research paper created by Travis Solway, PhD, and a number of colleagues from the University of British Columbia, University of Toronto, University of Victoria, and Ryerson University suggests that as many as 20,000 Canadians have been subjected to conversion therapy efforts, with approximately 1/3 of those individuals attempting suicide. Conversion therapy is strongly opposed by the American Psychological Association, the Canadian Psychological Association, and the Canadian Psychiatric Association. The World Health Organization issued a statement in 2012 saying this type of therapy poses a severe threat to the health and human rights of the affected persons. In the United States, 19 states and 1 district have laws or regulations protecting youth from this harmful practice. As well, at least 60 cities and countries in 10 other states have enacted similar protections. In our own country, Ontario has made the practice illegal for minors by initiating an outright ban. Manitoba has outlawed health professionals from offering conversion therapy. Nova Scotia has made it illegal for health professionals to provide conversion therapy for minors. In our very own province, Edmonton, Sherwood Park, and the City of St. Albert have all enacted bylaws which ban the practice and promotion of conversion therapy within municipal limits. Other municipalities, including Spruce Grove, Fort McMurray, and Calgary, are in the process of drafting bylaws. In March of 2019, the Liberal government rejected a petition with more than 18,000 signatures calling for a national ban. It admits publicly that, quote, conversion therapies are immoral, painful, and do not reflect the values of our government or those of Canadians, unquote, but added that it felt conversion therapy was largely a provincial and territorial issue. For myself, I consider this proposed bylaw to be one dealing with very basic human rights. To suggest a person's sexual orientation should be considered a curable disease or a mental disorder, one that requires therapy to quote-unquote fix the problem, is both archaic, dangerous, and very misguided. My desire with this motion is to enact a bylaw which very clearly demonstrates that our community is not okay with this type of activity, and to urge both our provincial and federal governments to take appropriate action to ban this practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sobel, and thank you for your efforts to bring this forward to us. Any other comments from councillors? Councillor Peterson, did you have any comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to say that I fully support the motion. I appreciate Councillor Sobel's work and dedication in the matter, and certainly will vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to thank Councillor Sobel for bringing this forward. It's very overdue, and I support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've had the discussion on the motion, and there is a motion on the floor. All in favor? Councillor Peterson?
Yes?
Thank you. So that motion has passed. And that brings us to item 11.2, which I have written down as trees. And Councillor Montgomery is going to be presenting on this.
Thank you, Worship. So I'll just speak to this first. So I will be making a motion to ask administration to put together a preliminary report on the development of the 14,000 tree initiative. And that's just to basically get an idea of what resources the town can bring to bear on this. So with that, I guess I would like to make a motion that we direct administration to bring back a preliminary report on the development of the 14,000 tree initiative.
Thank you very much, Councillor Montgomery. Is there any discussion on that motion? Councillor Peterson? Councillor Peterson?
No, Your Worship.
Thank you for the dramatic pause, Councillor Peterson. So we have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Councillor Peterson?
Yes.
Okay, that motion has passed, which brings us to item 12, bylaws. 12.1, bylaw number 20-01, Community Standards Bylaw Amendment for Crematorium. And Renee, you are presenting on this. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship. I unfortunately don't have a slideshow for you today. Administration is bringing forward the amendments to the Community Standards Bylaw, excuse me, under Bylaw 20-1, based upon the desire of Council at the December 4th, 2019 meeting to provide enforceable provisions and regulations for the maintenance and operation of crematoriums within the town of Strathmore. Manufacturers of cremation retort units require annual testing and report on the maintenance and operation at that time. Prior to issuing the yearly business license for a crematorium, administration is proposing to require a copy of the written confirmation of the annual maintenance report showing the unit is maintained and in good operating condition. Secondly, administration is requiring an annual copy of all employee and new employee training in relation to the crematorium unit prior to issuing a yearly business license. Lastly, for a new crematorium in Strathmore, administration would be requiring a copy of the written confirmation of a field inspection report, which is post-installation, and it shows the best setting after 6 cremations as determined by the manufacturer in the calibration process. Any complaints would be received by the town of Strathmore in relation to a crematorium would be investigated by a peace officer in order to determine the validity and course of action. Any complaints surrounding the opacity of smoke or particulate size would be communicated as well to the Alberta Funeral Services Regulatory Board and to Alberta Environment under their acts. If at any time a crematorium receives a direct complaint The crematorium shall record each complaint as per the bylaw and notify development services at the town of Strathmore in writing in no less than 2 business days. And in collaboration with the senior peace officer at the town of Strathmore, a list of penalties for bylaw infraction have been provided in the package. And any questions relating to enforcement can be directed to the peace officer at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Renee. Questions, comments from council? Councillor Peterson.
Your worship, I apologize because I might have missed this in the transition. The testing requirements, have they been waived? And we talked about that in our last meeting. We talked about some pretty stringent testing requirements that were in place in, I believe it was in Ontario. That they weren't in place, but they have been proposed by an Ontario community. So is that part of this?
Through your worship, that's not a part of this.
No,
In
what I
relation to
read.
Alberta standards, we have spoken with Alberta Environment and had discussed, I know that source testing was something that did come up. There was no comparatives.
Right.
So because it's not a regulation, even if we did require source testing or some kind of a testing, we would have to quantify what we were testing for and then what we would be testing it against. And so in research that I have done, I looked at specifically for CO2, I know that was one question.
Yep.
The output for the crematorium was 20,000 cubic meters, I believe, in a year. The outlook or the look at a home, so a 2-car home with 1 furnace, would produce about 16,000, so very comparable to 2.2 homes in regards to CO2 output.
Right.
And that was kind of the basis of why we didn't request the testing was
Right.
it compared to the AAOQ or AQO, sorry, there was nothing.
Thank you, Renee. And that's
compare
exactly,
it-
that's
to compare it
exact.
to.
I saw in your report, the thoroughness of it. I really appreciated it. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't a part of the Alberta standards, and I just wanted that on the record. And
No,
so,
correct.
yeah,
Through
and
your
thank
worship,
you.
it wasn't, it's
Yeah.
not a part of the Alberta standards. It's not anything that we have in Alberta that we could compare it to.
Yeah.
So our thought was to have them do the testing, costing possibly thousands of dollars.
Right.
We have nothing to compare that
Right,
to.
yeah. No, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the thorough work you did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you very much, Renee. Could you just expand a little bit on Section 4D with regards to providing a copy, like after the 6 cremations, can you just expand on what that requires?
Sure. So Section 4D says to provide a copy of the CSA field inspection report to development services at the town of Strathmore, outlining the best settings as per the manufacturer's specifications after 6 cremations have been performed. So what this is in the materials that we've received from the manufacturer, it has said that in order to calibrate the machine, so it would have the proper temperature, the proper, I guess, calibration, for lack of better words. They do between, I believe it was 5 and 8, so we picked 6 and said after 6, we'd like to see what those settings are, and then have that report provided for the file.
Okay. And do you feel that this, like, the bylaw that we've put together in this particular amendment, do you think that it, if somebody was to want to start a crematorium with a different type of crematory, would we have to kind of go through a process of modifying it for that?
Through the chair, I'm not actually 100% sure on other specifications. I know that there are companies, this particular, I guess, the particular model we have coming or proposed here is a Canadian model. It's the only company that I'm aware of that is in Canada. I know there are models from the United States. They do have different standards. I don't know if they all have the same calibration standards. I'm imagining they would either be similar or, I mean, they must have some kind of calibration at the beginning. So that might be something that we would have to look at in writing, say, a direct control for that particular site if someone came in with a different model and or possibly amending it at that time. I mean, at this point, we're writing it with the information that we have currently available.
Yeah, thank you. And my final question is, if somebody, let's say, didn't know that they were supposed to call the funeral home with a complaint. It's fine if they call the town and register a complaint of some sort.
Through the chair, correct. That's
Okay.
if they do complain to the funeral home has the 2-day period and they have a criteria that they have to provide to us in regards to how they report back. And we actually have something from the proposed crematorium saying, here's our reporting process, how we're gonna do it. And then if they did want to call us, then we can investigate ourselves. So that's something that the peace officer can look at in regards to, does it need to go to Alberta Environment if it's in contravention of the act, or if it needs to go to the AFSRB, the funeral board, Alberta Funeral Board regulation, so that it may be in contravention of their act of the cemetery or the crematory act.
Like, if I remember correctly, like, I believe the gentleman from the funeral home said something about a 40% opacity is kind of the rule.
Yes.
So, but if, we're not, like, we probably have a stricter standard than that, I would expect, right?
Through the chair, we don't currently have a standard. That's
Right.
the standard set by Alberta Environment,
Yeah.
saying no more than 40% opacity.
Right.
However, the system is set, this particular system is set to actually do those checks and balances and shut itself down if it does detect any smoke production. If there was a malfunction, that would be something that would have to manually shut down in that case. But that's something that, in speaking with Alberta Environment, they can then come out and assess, and they can actually shut down the operations, do their own inspections, make sure that it is up and running properly before they would reissue the ability to say, yes, it can continue operating. And the Alberta Funeral Services Board would actually, they have a licensing process outside of the town of Strathmore, through, I believe it's just all over Alberta. So they would actually be able to pull that license, and then the crematorium can't operate until they reissue their license.
And like that, they would be like that would be at the 40% is where they would run into problems with those guys?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Did you guys kind of contemplate setting a standard, like, that's lower than 40% for our town?
Through the chair, we didn't, only because we don't have the capacity to test. I mean, we don't know what 40% opacity would look like. That's the specialty that somebody would have at Alberta Environment that could actually do that testing. That's not something that the town can actually test for. I believe the intent is that if you were to see smoke coming out of the stack, that we would automatically assume it needs to be investigated.
Okay. Okay. And I remember, like, the gentleman from the funeral home, he was, quite kind of clear that they would be very unhappy if their unit was producing any sort of, like, kind of visible smoke. So, thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. And again, thank you, Renee, for your comments and your responses to questions. So at this time, I'm looking for a motion for a first reading. Councillor Sobel.
Thank you. I'd move that council give first reading to bylaw 20-01, Community Standards Bylaw Amendment for Crematorium.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. I will move that council gives second reading to bylaw number 20-01, Community Standards Bylaw Amendment for Crematorium.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Now that we have a motion for second reading, is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? That's good, thank you. Councillor Peterson.
Your worship, I'd move third and final reading of bylaw 20-1, amendment bylaw.
Are you doing unanimous consent right now?
Unanimous consent, yes, sorry.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Montgomery. So we have a motion on the floor for unanimous consent to a third reading. All in favor? Councillor Peterson.
And now I would move third reading, your worship, of bylaw 20-1 bylaw amendment.
Thank you very much. You've all heard that motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. And I believe we're on. Thank you again, Renee, for all your work and your presentation tonight. That brings us to item 13, urgent business, and 13.1 is, did you have a comment, Jennifer? Sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Administration would like to request a recess.
All right, we'll take a quick recess. Thank you. We're on to item 13.1, urgent business, and that is the item I'm bringing forward. So at this time, I'd like to turn the chair over to Councillor Peterson, who is, we have a few people away tonight. Deputy Mayor Corbeil is away, so Councillor Peterson is the next one scheduled to be Deputy Mayor, so I'd like to turn the chair over to Councillor Peterson.
So proceed.
Thank you, Your Worship. At this time, I would move that council approve the mayor to seek legal counsel for an issue related to FOIP, Section 24, Bracket 1, Bracket B, Bracket II.
Having heard the motion, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. I relinquish the chair, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peterson, for stepping in so eloquently. We're on to item 14, questions between councillors and council statements. Are there anything from councillors? Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two items under this item. One is, as most of us are aware, Canada's Parliament established a Central Police Force on May 3rd, 1973. 1873. Well, that didn't look good. 1873. And their mandate was, of course, to patrol newly acquired land in Western Canada, and 150 recruits were sent west to Manitoba. This marked the beginning of the Northwest Mounted Police. What may not be as well known, however, is that on February 1st, 1920, and acting upon a vote in Parliament, the Northwest Mounted Police joined forces with the Eastern Canada-based Dominion Police Force. And the result was a new national police force which went by the name of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or RCMP. This week marks the 100th anniversary of that occasion, as well as the RCMP name, And I would like to take this opportunity to express my profound thanks and admiration for the men and women, both peace officers and civilian employees, who make up our national police force, and who have been doing so for 100 years. A special thanks goes to our own detachment here in Strathmore. We continue to reside in one of the safest communities in our province, thanks to their efforts. My second item, Your Worship, is in regards to our local Strathmore Performing Arts Festival group, and they are reporting that there is over 300 entries this year to their festival, which is an increase of 50% over last year. It's just absolutely amazing. The festival dates are March 27th to April the 4th, and the showcase concert, which if anybody can catch anything with this group, that is an amazing concert, is April 7th, and there'll be more information coming. Anybody's interested can catch their website at www.strathmoreaf.com. And that's all I have, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sobel. Any other council statements or questions between councillors? Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to talk about the Chamber Business Awards, the Chamber of Commerce Business Awards that were held on Friday. The event was run very well, and it was quite impressive to see just how well our chambers come along. And I wanted to congratulate all the businesses that won awards that night. They were well deserved. And secondly, I just wanted to let the public know that I will be producing another video soon that will be related to how to report problems to the town of Strathmore in an effective way and get results. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Any other comments? No. Moving on to item 15, administrative inquiries. Jennifer, do we have any tonight? Or, sorry, Deborah.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have two administrative inquiries tonight. The first one is from Councillor Montgomery on individual accounts. Can administration produce an estimate of the number of different accounts an individual might have to create in order to utilize the various online managed services? Example, My Strathmore, Perfect Mind, the community calendar, etc. Furthermore, can we move towards consolidation of accounts rather than the solicitation of more. Second administrative inquiry is from Councillor Sobel regarding a trade show project, Cars and Homes. The decision to build a sports centre was not one taken lightly by council. It was done with many goals in mind, one of which was for the possibility of the building hosting a trade show. Respectfully, I wish to put forward an idea for a trade show that has the potential of attracting a large quantity of our neighbours from southern Alberta area. The concept would see 3 different groups joining together to be the hosts of the trade show. The first 2 groups would be commercial business, one representing the housing industry, developers, builders, real estate agents, etc., and the other group representing motor vehicles, represented by 3 car dealerships that we have in town. With the proper advertising, these 2 groups will ensure a very healthy attendance. The third group, previously mentioned, would consist of the town's Economic Development Department, who would have the opportunity to demonstrate the many benefits that exist for those wishing to relocate here. The Economic Development Department would be able, of course, to partner with other interested parties, example, Golden Hills, School Division, etc. I would be interested in administration's comments on this matter.
Thank you very much, Deborah. So that brings us to the end of administrative inquiries, and at this time, we are looking for a motion to go in camera. Councillor Peterson, comment?
Yeah, comment. First of all, I think this is a fantastic idea. It aligns so well with our strategic plan and the plans of other organizations within our community, and respects those builders and developers and economic interests. Really appreciate it, Councillor Sobel. And Your Worship, I would move to go in camera.
Thank you very much. We have a motion to go in camera. All in favor? And we're going in camera at 7:38, so for those members of the public, we would ask you to please exit council chambers as we have issues that are confidential dealing with land, legal, or labor.